Hey everybody, Jane here, and I am coming to you with my November 2024 wrap up. I cannot believe the year is almost over. I am so excited for a new year of reading, but also, wow, this year has gone fast. So, I am actually going to be talking about the 17 books I read or tried to read in the month of November. Briefly on my stats, I don't think any of the books I read this month were indie, and I believe two of them were from my own shelf. So this year has not been great on my goals, and I'm definitely going to have to do some reevaluating before next year. If you're new to my wrap-ups, I generally give you these in the order of star rating, so we'll start with my DNFs and then go from there. So I had 3 DNFs this month, and I will say all of them were books that I don't think were bad. I just felt like they were not for me, but they very much might be for you. So the first book that I DNF'd this month was Library of the Unwritten. This is a fantasy adventure story, and it is about a librarian who is in a library for books that are unwritten, and this library exists in hell. And one of the books comes to life more or less, and this is not uncommon with unwritten books. And while she is reining it in, they find this bookish artifact, and her and the book and her other companions go on this journey to try to find this bookish artifact related to her job as a librarian. And I don't want to give too much away, but heaven, hell, artifacts, books. I was listening to this on audiobook, and it wasn't a bad book. I was really engaged in parts of it. I just am not a huge fan of adventure stories. And kind of after, I think I was 2 or 3 hours in, I just didn't really care that much, and I was kind of bored. I didn't think the book was boring. I just think it wasn't really for me. And so I was like, I could push through this, but I have a lot of other books I'd rather read, and I don't think I'm going to come back to this, and I don't think, even if I hung around and read it, that it would be something I was going to love just because of what it is, and I just wasn't feeling it. So I ended up DNFing it, but I think it's a well-written book, and I think if you're more into adventure stories, you might have a better time with it than I did. The second book I DNF'd this month was the Railway series collection, book 1. So this is Thomas the Tank Engine, and when my kids were little, they were big into Thomas the Tank Engine. I was big into Thomas the Tank Engine as a kid, but I'd never read the books. And I decided to get it on audio just to see how it was. I'd kept seeing these posts on Facebook about how these books are kind of horror if you really consider what the trains are going through. And I thought that would be a really cool experience. I want to see it from a different perspective. Unfortunately, as I tried listening to it, it is very much like watching Thomas the Tank Engine, which shows you how good the show did, but also after about 30 minutes of it, I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm good. I thought it was going to be fun, and for me, it just was a little bit too juvenile and too, like, we'd already done this with the kids growing up. They're teenagers now. I didn't want to do it again. So while that book is probably great if you have littles, and maybe even great if you are really into middle grade or trains or don't have a lot of experience with Thomas, it was too much like the shows for me, and so I was like, I'm good. I'm good. But again, nothing wrong with it, just a preference. The last book I DNF'd was a manga, Cats of the Louvre. Manga is not always something I jive really well with anyway, and this is not quite what I was expecting. I was expecting cats in the Louvre, and that's kind of what this is, but these cats become human. Or I think they become human. Sometimes manga is hard for me to follow, and I don't know if it's not understanding the Japanese culture and folklore very well, or if it's translation things that are being lost on me. But as far as I could tell, there are cats in the Louvre, and they become human, like a reverse were-kitty or something. And it just was a little bit too weird for me. Also, these humans are really weird looking when they are in, or these cats are really weird looking in their human form, and it kind of just ekes me out. So there is like a picture, I don't know how well you can see that, of some of these cats in their human form. And I wasn't loving the art. I wasn't loving the story. I just wanted cute cats in a museum, and that's not quite what I got. So I decided to cut my losses and not finish it. All right, so everything else I did finish this month. And I only had one 3-star, which is the next one on my list. I did not have any 1-stars. I did not have any 2-stars. That is fairly typical for me. I occasionally do have a 2-star. I haven't given something a 1-star forever because I DNF so frequently. But for the 3-star this month, it is also a graphic novel, and it is Ruined. This is a story about a girl who enters into a marriage with a guy, and it's kind of an arranged marriage. It's kind of a marriage of convenience. They're not in love. They don't know each other very well, and it's them getting to know each other and falling in love. And I just didn't think for me that this worked very well. I love romances, and sometimes romance novels in a graphic novel or a manga work. And for me, this was just kind of a miss, although I will say it had lovely art. If you are thinking of picking this up, just know that there are some semi-adult pictures. It's not explicit, but it's enough to know what's happening. So if that's not your jam, this might not be for you. It was fine. It was okay. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. I didn't have as many feels or connections to characters as I wanted to. And it was just kind of okay. So I wouldn't tell you not to pick it up, but maybe go in with moderate expectations. All right, then the next books on my list are 4-star reads. The first one we have is Kill for Me, Kill for You. This is a thriller, and it involves, it's kind of a strangers on a train situation. So you have Amanda and Wendy, who are both going to grief support groups, and they both have lost people in their lives to terrible circumstances. Amanda is one of our point of view characters, and her daughter was murdered by a serial killer who is also like a child molester. And so she wants revenge on this guy, and she's been trying to do it herself, but she just can't. So she meets Wendy at grief group, and they decide we will trade murder. So Wendy has also lost somebody and wants Amanda to take out her person. And so they make this agreement, and things go terribly wrong. I think I'm going to do a full spoilery review because since this is a thriller, there's a lot of things we can't talk about without spoiling things. But what I will say is this book had some really brilliant twists, and then it had some twists that I didn't feel great about. I really enjoyed most of this book, but at the last 20 pages, some of the things it did really didn't sit well with me. And so I really struggled with it. But overall, I had a good time, and it was a good thriller read. I just wasn't real satisfied with the last 20 pages. The next book on my list is Front Lines. This was actually kind of a surprise to me. This is one that I read for my World War II vlog, and I wasn't sure I was going to love it because it is a YA, and the characters are all kind of their late teens. It is books about women written by men, or a book about women written by men. by a man, and I just wasn't sure I was going to jive with this, but I liked it so much more than I expected it to. So in this, we have a world where in World War II, women can be drafted and they can serve in the military. And that was a great concept, and I liked it way more than I expected to. We have three young women. One is from like a small town. Her sister has passed away in the service. I think her sister was Navy. And so her family does not want her to enlist, but her best friend's enlisting. She wants to get out of her small town. And the best friend has convinced her that they're girls. They're going to be answering phones. It's going to be fine. They're going to find hot officers to marry. So you have her. You also have a girl who is African American, struggling with poverty because her father's had an accident and cannot work. And so she goes to join up because she wants to be able to send her military money back home to her family so that they don't lose their home. Also, she really would like to be a doctor someday, so she's a medic and she is very passionate about medicine. Our third person is a girl who is of Jewish descent, and her cousin is in Europe at this time, and nobody's heard from her for a while, and so they're all very concerned, probably with very good reason. And she decides to join up and gets a position in military intelligence. So the first half of the book is largely their training, going to basic, kind of the pushback they're having from the men who don't think women have any business being in war and should be just home, you know, cooking and cleaning and all the stuff. So you have a lot of like prejudice against them, which was also really interesting too, because the girl who is African American, she is getting pushback not only because she's a woman, but also because she's African American. Lots of prejudice against her. And there was some really good commentary in this about how they're fighting a war that is literally about prejudices. And yet in the US, they're having these issues, obviously a slightly different level, but it was a really interesting story. The second half, the girls are in combat for the first time, and it's a real wake-up call because war is not what they were expecting. And I have an ex-husband who's a soldier, and a lot of the things that he told me about war and combat, you know, really jived with what this book was doing. So I was surprised how much I really enjoyed it. It is a 3-book series. I could say you could read this one as a standalone. You wouldn't have to continue. I do plan on continuing at some point because I had a good time and am enjoying it. The next book is technically a reread, but it has been probably 5 years since I read it, and that is Mistborn. This is about a world where some people can have magical powers by ingesting metals. So you have Kelsier, who is trying to raise an army, more or less, to go against the powerful people who killed his wife and imprisoned him and caused all kinds of mayhem in his world. You also have Vin, who is a young girl who is they're using to infiltrate the elite, and she is a Mistborn, and as is Kelsier, who can use this metal to have superpowers. It is fun. I've never gone further in the series, but I will be in the future. I'm buddy reading this with some friends. I enjoy this. It's not necessarily the type of book I would normally pick up to read for myself. There is a really fun element of like almost Pygmalion, where they have to teach Vin how to act as a society lady, so that she doesn't get caught, because she's basically like servant class, and they have to teach her to pass herself off as one of the elites. So I really had a fun time with that part of it. There's a really sweet relationship in it that I love. There's a lot of complexity in the world and a lot of discussion of the world and of class, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening. For me, it's a little bit more adventure-y than I personally prefer, but I had a good time with it. I did partially read this one and partially audiobook it. For myself, audiobook is my preference with this because I need it to move a little quicker. It's a chunky book and it takes a while to read, and I struggled a little bit the first time. I didn't have the struggle the second time because I did do quite a bit of it in audio. But it is a good book. I would recommend it, and I'm going to be continuing the series. The next book I have is a manga. It is Ascendance of a Bookworm. This is part 2, volume 2. I'm enjoying this series. I talk about this a lot because I'm reading a lot of these. This is about a girl who died in her world and wakes up in another world in the body of this little girl, and she really wants books, and the family that she is born into now is poor. They don't have the ability to get her books, and so she has to figure out how to get books in this world where books are very difficult to come by, valuable, and she's poor. And there's magic and shenanigans that ensue. It's a good time. Also part of a manga series, I finished Blood on the Tracks, volume 15. This series is giving me a hard time. So I loved the beginning of the series. There was a major time jump, and we're in like a lot further in, and I think there's only 2 books left in the series anyway. It's a complicated book, and sometimes I love what it's doing and sometimes I don't. This is a book about a mother and a son. And the son was very overprotected, and then he sees his mother push his cousin off of a cliff. His mother has some mental health issues, and it's how he deals with it and his relationship with her. And it's a little bit of a horror, especially in the beginning. It's less horrific now as I'm further in. I'm enjoying it, but I wish the payoff was more. And I'm hoping in the last 2 books we crank up a little bit, get a little more payoff, because I'm a little bit disappointed with kind of the way things have gone, especially since the time jump. The next book I have is Murder in Rose Hill. This is the most recent of the Gaslight Mystery series, and I believe, but I'm not sure, that it is going to be the last. The author has recently passed away. In this book, we have Frank and Sara. Frank was a member of the police force, and now he's a private detective. We have Sara, who is a midwife, and they are investigating the death of a woman who was working for a magazine and was looking into these remedies that these companies were selling, like over-the-counter type medicines that may have some ingredients that were not as helpful as they could have been. And so they are really investigating this and trying to look into not only these remedies, but also the girl, who was in her life. What was her life like at the magazine? They send one of their coworkers undercover. It's a really good time. I love this series. I'm sad it's over, or I don't know if the author had like any other books that were in the works. I do think, based on the last thing that happened in the book, this is a pretty good way to end it. It didn't necessarily close all of the plots that I wanted in it, but I think it was satisfying. There's a major thing that happens in the last couple pages that I think makes this feel like it's a good closure to the series. The mystery was fine. I don't really read these for the mysteries as much as I read them for the characters and the historical things. This didn't disappoint with the historical stuff. It didn't disappoint with the characters. The mystery was fine. The mystery in this one, I was a little surprised by who did it. I had a guess, but I didn't guess correctly. So it kept me going. I wasn't necessarily super satisfied with who done it, and that's okay, because sometimes with these books, I'm not. But overall, I think this series is worth picking up. This is book like 20 something in the series. I've loved pretty much the entire series. I thought I'd read everything. I think I've got 2 books though that I somehow missed in the series, so I'm going to go back and read those. Then I'll have read the entire series. And if you love really character heavy mysteries and historical mysteries, this is a really good series. Highly, highly recommend it. And again, that is Victoria Thompson, the Gaslight Mystery Series, or a Gaslight Mystery Series. All right, the next book I read was Barbarian's Treat. This book, I gave it a 4 because I love Ruby Dixon and I love the stories that she does. And even though this is kind of, it's part of the Ice Planet Barbarians and it's just a little fun Halloween novella, I had a good time. I enjoy Ruby Dixon. This was short, this was sweet, this was, we bring Halloween to the Ice Planet, not Hoth, in Ice Planet Barbarians. There's really no romance in this one. There's really no shenanigans. It was just like a slice of life, fun time on this planet, hanging with these characters that we've established and know and like, watching them try to appreciate Halloween on this ice planet. It was fluffy and fun, and if you've read Ice Planet Barbarian series, it's worth picking up for a good time as long as you don't care that there's not going to be any spice in it, because I don't think there was any spice at all. There was maybe a little bit of implied spice, but that was it. But it was a good time. I enjoyed hanging out with these characters that I already love. The next book I read was Lost in the Moment and Found. And this is one of the Wayward Children series. And it is about it is a portal fantasy. So it is a girl who goes into a portal and ends up in a different world, and kind of like what happens to her in that world and how that portal fantasy world works. So the Wayward Children series, typically you have one book that is set in like the main timeline, and then you have another book that is a character's portal series or portal situation. So the Wayward Children series is about kids who have gone through portals to other worlds, are back on Earth for various reasons, and then they're trying to deal with the fact that they want to go back to the world that was their portal world, but a lot of times they can't. So it was a very interesting one. I liked it. I don't tend to love these books, but they're a good time, and I really like the portal ones, typically more than the main storyline, although that's not always true. Right after I read this one, I read Mislaid in Parts Unknown. And that is the next book in the series, and now I'm actually caught up. I'm waiting for the next one to be published, so yay. And this was back at the school. So the same girl who went through all those portals before, she is back at the school, or she's gone to Eleanor's school for gifted children, and then adventures happen. I will say this book was pretty important to the plotline. There's some major things that happen, and I'm not sure how I feel about them. So we'll have to see how the series continues. There was a major thing that happened to a character I really like, and so I think that is going to affect that character long term, and I don't know how I'll feel about that in the series because of that. I will say that I think that Mislaid in Parts Unknown and Lost in the Moment and Found need to be read close to each other because they are so intertwined. A lot of the books you don't necessarily have to read really soon after each other because it's important, but it's not that important. These are two that I think if I'd have not read them right back to back, I would have been confused because so much happened in the latter one that was related to what had happened in the book just before that. So if you're going to read these two very close. They were both fine and in my 4 stars. I have another book from the series in my 4 stars, and this one is a novella. It was a really quick, short little novella called Skeleton Song. For those who are familiar with the series, it is Chris's portal world. I will say I was a little disappointed because it was so short, so quick. We didn't really get very much. It was more like a vignette almost. So I would have loved to see Chris having a whole book. but for what it was, I had a great time. It was cool seeing his world. And while I would have loved to have actually like gotten a whole book with Chris's world, it was a good time. I really can't complain. The next book is another Ice Planet Barbarians, and this one is Barbarian's Tease. This is, I never can keep track of the guys' names, but it's Brooke's book. And this is another one that I rated for because I love Ruby Dixon's writing style. I enjoy the Ice Planet Barbarians world. I enjoy the books, the plots. This one though, the characters weren't hitting it for me. I did not like Brooke. So in the Ice Planet Barbarian series, you have a group of women who end up on this ice planet that is full of aliens, and they have these fated mate relationships with these aliens. Some of the books have amazing character development. Some of them have great conflict in characters and stories, and some of them are kind of meh. This one I think is maybe my least favorite or second least favorite. So I did not love Harlow's book either. I haven't fully decided if I like this one less than Harlow's book, but it's probably pretty close. And that was largely, like I said, just because I did not like Brooke, who is the female character. The guy was annoying, but he wasn't terrible. There was plot. It's a world I like. It's side characters I like. So it was not the worst book ever, but I was very disappointed in it because I wanted so much more, because I love the series and I like books in the series. And Brooke just was not a character that I could engage with. So I was really kind of disappointed about that one. The last of our 4-star reads was The Nightmare Before Kissmas. So this is a male-male romance with the son of Santa Claus and the son of like Halloween prince or Halloween king. And they, I guess I need to back up. So the son of Santa, I think his name was Cole. He is kind of always been a little bit of a disappointment to his dad. He does these really crazy things, and the dad is always like, "Why are you messing up my holiday?" So he actually had met Hex, who is the prince of Halloween, at a bar several years, or I don't know if it was months or years, but a while ago. He had just gotten in trouble with his dad. He was at a real low point, and he was just feeling all kinds of ways. And Hex had given him some really good advice, and he never forgot it, and he never stopped thinking about Hex. Well, fast forward a while. I don't know if it was months or years. It was a time though. And Cole's dad, Santa Claus, comes in and he's like, "Listen, Cole, you're going to marry the Easter princess." And Cole's like, "But I don't want to marry the Easter princess. Him and the Easter princess are friends, but they don't have any romantic feelings for each other." And Santa's like, "We got to strengthen our holidays. She wants to strengthen her holiday, so you guys are going to get married." Well, then there is some issues, and they decide, for drama and reasons and to make the other holidays not feel like Christmas is trying for a power move, even though it totally is, they're like, "Okay, we're going to bring in the Prince of Halloween and let him compete with you for Easter Princess." And so Hex shows up, and Cole is like, "Oh my gosh, this is the guy." And so they end up not competing for the princess and just kind of being a thing for each other. And it was lovely. It is a little bit YA, and so you have some of the themes of like the family drama and the who am I going to become and the teen rebellion. I think Hex and Cole are like early 20s. So they're not really teens, but they're like early 20s. They're in college type thing. But it was a good time. I loved it. It is not sweet and clean, but it doesn't have a lot of spice. There was like one really, really, really spicy scene, and it was lovely. It was really well done. So, but this is kind of a fun holiday read. It's mostly very fluffy. There is kind of a plot of, you know, Christmas is doing some shenanigans, and Cole doesn't want that to be the legacy of Christmas, especially because he's going to inherit someday. And so, like, fixing Christmas, and then of course dealing with this, he's supposed to be marrying the princess who's his friend, and he's not because he likes Hex. And so, you know, Hex and him are like running around and trying not to get him in trouble for the fact that they're supposed to be pursuing the princess and they're not. But it was a lovely, cute, fun, fluffy read. And I think, as you can probably tell, I had a lot of like cute, fun, fluffy popcorn reads this month, and that was very much what I needed. Now we can move in to my 1 5-star. And guys, I loved this book way more than I expected to. And that is Half a Soul. This book was so good. It was so fun. It reads like a Regency romance, but with magic. So we have a girl whose name is Dora, and she had half of her soul stolen by a fairy. Because of this, she doesn't have a lot of emotion. She processes things weird. I would say that she is kind of meant to give autistic vibes. And so she knows that she is not really well suited for court. But her cousin is doing the ton and the dances and the balls and trying to find a husband. And Dora just loves her cousin, so she goes with her. While she is out and about doing all the stuff, she meets the Lord Sorcier. And the Lord Sorcier is kind of like a magician who works for the king, and he's best friends with this one lord who the aunt of Dora wants Dora to get with. Dora is not living with her parents. Her mother has passed away, and I don't remember if her dad had passed away as well, but she's being raised by her aunt. And so the aunt really would like Dora to marry, I think his name was Nicholas, but I can't be quoted. But he wants her to marry this guy who's best friends with the Lord Sorcier, and who is a doctor and is, you know, really a fun guy. And they want Dora's cousin to marry his older brother. So they're like trying to get in with the family. Well, she is not interested in the doctor guy. She finds herself interested in the Lord Sorcerer, but like initially she's kind of turned off from him because he's a little bit of a jerk. He's a little bit of a Darcy type character. Although we learn that is largely because he was in the war. He has some very strong feelings about war, and they're not the kind of feelings that people want civilized returned soldiers of the upper class to have. He didn't have a good time in the war. So you have like this dynamic of he's not super nice to her initially, but then they become friends and they fall in love, and it is just beautiful. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted from like a Regency romance with magic. So yes, I had a brilliant time with it. And that was I needed that 5-star. It had been a while since I had a 5-star. It was great. I love the characters. It gave me all the feels. And it was exactly what I wanted in that romance. I'd actually picked it up because another booktuber was talking about it. And I was like, that sounds so good. And it really, really was. All right, guys, those were the 17 books I read in the month of November. I was very excited. A good next to last reading month of the year. If you have any comments about any of these books, please put it in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for other books that are similar, particularly to Half a Soul, or other books similar to the ones that I've talked about that I really, really liked, please leave those in the comments below as well. I'm always looking for more books to read, although my TBR is huge, but you know, that's a thing. Also, tell me what your best read of the month was. What was your best read in November? A book that you just loved. Or if you didn't have any of those, tell me a little bit about maybe the reading month wasn't great for you. Whatever it is you'd like to share, please do so in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page.